Okay. If y'all could give me a thumbs up if you can see the content.
Yeah, we see it.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So I think we're going to get started here. Want to respect everyone's time. So thank you everyone for showing up today. It's kind of going to be very similar, if not the same format to our first meeting, but this is going to be a discussion of our Household Hazardous Products Action Plan, the second draft. So we've incorporated a lot of changes in recommendations that people have given us, which is why we haven't been able to send out a draft just yet, but I will do that shortly after this meeting. We've been actively working on updates up to this morning. So thank you for your patience with that. And again, just a refresher. We are going to be making changes and edits that are focused around the comments that we received today. So if you have a question or a comment that you'd like to share, please raise your hand and feel free to vocalize and tell us what you think. Additionally, you can write in the chat. I will say, I think it's probably a little easier to sort through the chat. So if you're interested in typing in your questions or comments, that's great. And then, honestly, it's been really great and valuable input for people that even would rather discuss their questions and comments after the meeting in another meeting with me potentially. And so that they can explain what they're thinking and kind of give a little bit of background to that. And we can banter back and forth too if it flesh out those ideas because we want ideas today. We know that things can be changed, but we want to have ideas of how to move forward and better the system. Okay. So again, thanks for joining us. Your camera is optional. Please mute your microphone. Co-hosts, you know who you are. So if someone would like to speak and is having trouble unmuting themselves, if you could please help unmute them. If you'd like to email me with any questions, my email address is on the screen right now. It's caitlin.e.king@mass.gov. And again, you'll have that once I send out the slides today after our meeting. Additionally, I think everyone has their name. If you could add your affiliation, that's preferred, just so we know how to contact you if we're not familiar with your name. But that's can be done quickly. On the next slide, I'll tell you how to update your name. But first, I'd like Richard, can you please introduce yourself? And then Lynn, I'd like you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Richard Blanchet, Deputy Division Director of Hazardous Materials Management Program. I oversee this program and looking forward to this meeting.
Thank you. Lynn?
Hi, I'm Lynn Kane, with the branch chief for the current toxics programs. I work with Richard and Caitlin.
Awesome. John, can you introduce yourself as well?
John Fisher, with MassDEP. I head up our solid waste programs at MassDEP. So Richard heads up the hazardous waste side. I head up the solid waste side.
Sweet. Okay. Just going to keep moving on. So if you need to rename yourself, you can click on the corner of your screen and where it shows your picture, there's a ... and you can click on the rename button. All right, so without further ado, we're just going to jump right into it. So those of you that were with us for the last meeting, you'll see that we've changed things up a little bit. We have 3 different tables in our action plan draft right now. There's the longer term implementation, there's a shorter plan implementation, and then there's an outreach education table as well. So each of the tables has these 3 columns, goals, elements, and notes. And I will say, additionally, there is a number to the left. That's just for our slides today for easy reference. So if you have any questions or comments pertaining to something within row 1, you can identify it that way. Okay.
So
So,
Caitlin,
yep.
just before we start, there's a question in the chat from Phil, and he says, comment, why is it not called household hazardous waste? HHW has been a common for a while. So we elected to use HHP, household hazardous products, because not all the materials that we're talking about, a good proportion of them are waste, but a lot of them can be reused at some point, and that's some of the elements that we're going to be talking through in discussion. So, and then we took the nomenclature from the original report back in the mid 90s that was developed by EEA. And so they went from HHW to HHP, and that's the reason why we're using HHP.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, so just jumping on the row 1 for the longer term implementation. So the goal here is to establish a plan by providing funding for permanent collection facilities. And more specifically, MassDEP is going to continue to provide grants for municipalities annually to establish the centers. And are there any more thoughts on permanent collection opportunities? So at this time, if you have any thoughts about permanent collection opportunities, please raise your hand, pop a chat in the comment. Looks like Phil raised his hand. Okay. Phil, can you unmute yourself?
A process question here. So we're doing this with you today. We're helping go through this line by line. Obviously, this is very difficult for us to not see the whole picture and, doing it on the fly. You're going to send this out for us to submit further comments later once we have the updated version, I presume?
Yeah, and that's always been the option too. You can
Okay.
send me an email and make a meeting with me so that we can discuss specifics.
You're going to send this to us, though, the updated version, so
In
we can.
PowerPoint, yeah.
Well, the plan. I mean, or is the PowerPoint the plan?
So the PowerPoint, this table is directly taken from the plan. There's a document version and then there's a PowerPoint version.
Right.
And it's just, the PowerPoint is just extracted the table. And we're going to be sharing the PowerPoint after this meeting because we only really want to discuss the table, which is presented in the PowerPoint. So we're just kind of trying to make it easier. And
that's what we should focus on, the tables. Okay.
yes,
Great.
yeah.
All right. So on the permanent long-term implementation, establish a plan to provide funding for implementation of permit collection facilities. The grant program that you have, while doing good things, I don't know that there's enough in there. And these are serious facilities. I've mentioned before, they're in the range of $3 million. You go out to Colorado and to Boulder County. So I'm not seeing anything here that would elevate the game. So for those who don't know, on behalf of several of us that work in the industry, Calliope on the Cape, who's retired now, Barnstable County runs the entire county program, all the towns, 15 towns, Clare, South Shore, Juanita in Newton. And I have been pursuing this for a long time, and I put in an environmental bond bill request to the Undersecretary for EEA, for the Environment, Stephanie Cooper, for $250,000 to do a master plan. So I'd like to see DEP, John Beeling was on that email chain and call, and he's familiar with this. So if you could reach out to John Beeling, John, and just, I'd like to see that on DEP's radar to support that study, because it was specifically written for $250,000 for DEP to hire a contractor to allocate the time to do a true master plan for, what a facility would look like, large, small, urban, how many would be around the state, what they would look like for cost, funding, et cetera, like a real master plan. So it says establish a plan to provide funding. So what I'm seeing here is that you'll just continue the grant program, but that's limited by the rec money that you're getting from the offset, the credits from the waste energy facilities. So whatever pool of money you have is not being increased. Do I have that right, John?
Well, I can't speak to the status of what's going on with the bond bill at this point. I'm not directly familiar with that. So I can't speak to that in particular, but otherwise, yes, as of now, the um, our funding is the available funding through the waste energy credits. That's our primary funding source that we're
And
working off.
what would you say would be a realistic amount that you allocate per year to something like that? $500,000, $1 million?
So that's a hard question to answer. Not a hard question to answer, but there are a lot of variables to answer that question because that funding is the funding that's used across all of our
Yep.
recycling, waste reduction, reuse programs. So that question just needs to be answered in kind of a broader context. So how much do we want to devote to, household hazardous waste, managing hazardous household products versus, say, funding compost site development and things like that. So it just needs to be kind of answered in that broader context.
Understand, and that's very helpful. And this is, you're making my point that there's a limit to what you can do within that program because if suddenly Springfield, Worcester, Boston, Cambridge, Brockton, and Quincy all submitted requests for $1 million for a permanent facility, now you've got, okay, there's $6 million right there. You're like, well, we got to divvy up the money for the RDP and the SMR, so we're only going to be able to pick 3 winners or 2 winners. So it's not nearly enough in a macro sense, is what I'm saying. And that's why we suggested the EBB. And I know I'm bringing it up now so that the team collectively, you and Richard and Greg and all the way up to
Mhm.
John, everybody can engage with Stephanie on that. I know it's a year away or more, but that could provide the funding to really get a model and a template for locations that may be available within the state system through DCAM, a small drop-off center model, but then an urban model. And so we get a real scale here. It could be, $100 million that we need for the entire state to do this. Who's going to do it? How are we going to do it? So the plan is this is what the state would really need to have a full coverage. That's what I'm talking about, right? That need, even if it's not funded, it should be discussed so that we can determine that. Because right now, this is the way this is. It's really putting the onus on the local regional planning agents, cooperatives, or individual towns like Lawrence or Hanover to take the initiative to figure it out, to come up with a site, to come up with a proposal, come up with funding. We have this piecemeal approach all around the state, and we don't know whether or not other communities within, say, a county are doing the similar things. So I think this is where we need to pool our resources, understand that, and this is tens of millions of dollars for a statewide program. If we want to elevate this truly to the next level for permanent facilities, that's exclusive of commercial. That's exclusive of the Clean Harbor site or say anything a hauling company wants to do. So I would urge on the establish the plan to talk about that beyond a limit of grant funding that you may have for the SMRP and expand the thinking to, okay, we're realistically only going to be able to fund this many right now, but if we were to do it a full state plan, this is what it would look like. We can help you with facilitating permitting and sizing and all that sort of stuff. But I think the community as a whole, planning agency, everybody. I'm sorry I'm droning on here, but this is a big slide. This is a big one, right? We know we need these facilities. We have 6 months of gap coverage every year. So I don't think the plan as you have it here is sufficient to really get to the heart of that matter. So I hope that helps. I'm willing to talk more about that, but I think we really need a realistic understanding of how we're going to tackle an urban area in and around Boston that could probably handle 4 or 5 facilities that are permanent. What is that really going to be for financing? Who's going to do it? So I hope that helps.
Yeah, just one more comment from a budget perspective, I obviously I can't, um, commit to a specific budget amount right now, but two comments about it. One is that recently the waste energy credits were set in place at a higher level. They were maintained at a higher level, which is going to raise the overall amount of funding that we have available for waste reduction programs. So we do anticipate being able to devote increased levels of funding to priority program areas over the years. And it may be more than you think, kind of depending on demand and need. Because the other thing to keep in mind is, say someone comes in for a $1 million grant, hypothetically, for a collection center, that's probably not going to be paid out in 1 year, I'm guessing. So, that maybe that's $500,000 a year for 2 years or something like that. So, there may be, some bandwidth to increase funding to some significant degree, but beyond what we're allocating right now, kind of depending on demand and need. So we can certainly talk about that more as we move forward with this.
I think it's worthy to have that discussion and to note the limitations of the current grant program, but that if we want to go to the next level, that may be a limiting factor from the funding source that we have, and the legislature may need to understand from something like this that requires a significant bonding authorization that would allow communities to access funds. So that may be a completely different financial model because we're talking again on a larger scale. So I just urge the group to consider that. The plan that's here is not sufficient, in my personal view, to get to where we want to go, because it's really a heavy lift for municipalities to start asking for $4 million from their citizens to do something like that for the region. So thank you for listening.
Sure. Thanks for that input, Phil. And I think like for the edits that we're looking for today, like it's definitely amazing to think of those different perspectives and everything. But if there's anything specifically that we can like add in here, that's kind of what we're looking is like to expand this table. I know you have like a lot of broad scale thoughts too, and that's fantastic. But if there's like, I don't know, it's kind of tricky to put them into this table. But yeah. Let's see. So David Nightingale.
David Nightingale, yeah.
Thanks very much. Good morning. Just wanted to build a little bit on what Phil said, and in my experience, it's really really critical to leverage state fund grant availability. You can get oftentimes a lot of local funds to come in with not the majority, but even 1/5 of the funds you might need for something to leverage and inspire local governments to come up with a lot of local funding for that. But the main thing I wanted to say was that under the goals column there, don't really have, or the elements you're saying about what you have, but sort of my experience is that if you really want to have an effective program, you ought to have something along the lines of what you see in other EPR programs where there's a convenience factor goal, so many miles from so many percentage of the population. It doesn't quite work as well, I think, for HHP facilities. I think it's more like population, facilities per population, and what seems to be get to an effective level is something around 100,000 to 200,000 population per facility. So that would be for like a major facility, and like Phil said, multiple ones around in Boston would be obviously an answer. And I'm seeing that happening in states where there's a more developed system now, that even after 20 years, they're adding facilities. The Seattle King County area, for instance, it's got, I don't know, 1.5 million people or something like that. They're building their 4th facility and talking about their 5th facility now. And their first facility went in the late 80s. So, it's a developmental thing, but having the availability of ongoing state funding to leverage that development has been critical in a lot of areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any other thoughts about permanent collection opportunities? Okay, and again, you can always write in the chat. This is row one. So if you have any questions, comments, or you can always follow up via email.
Hey, Caitlin, there was one comment from Jan Amin in the chat. Is there a separate goal for private permanent facilities? Jan, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Well, it's something we can take that into account and think about adding something along those lines.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so for row two, for the longer term implementation, so promote expanding EPR initiatives and waste categories. So more specifically, paint care, working through the commissioner's office for EPR commission, encouraging retailers to provide alternatives and encourage consumers to switch, incentivizing retailers to take back materials. So, are there any ideas on how to drive more voluntary/retailer collection options? I'm seeing Phil. Can you unmute yourself, or do we have to?
I did that. It looks like you
Okay.
might have to, you actually sent a little code or something that had to push a button. So Jan, for you, if you get that too, that's how I did it. So this is another huge slide, right? The commission was excellent. They're off to a good start. It was unclear to me, so I'd say don't limit it to paint care. You've got mattress care. You've got the lithium-ion batteries. We got Juanita deftly mentioned that we should have HHW, HHP as part of an extent EPR program like they're doing in Vermont, which they passed. So there should be, promoting. But I would add a slide here. Elements DEP will research other models around the state, around the country, such as in particular with HHPW is Vermont. You should be reaching out to Vermont and Maine, who are doing significant work in this area. So I would add that specifically. Again, I brought this up. I'm not clear what you mean by support. Support is a very vague term. The commissioner is now empowered by the legislature to have a commission, which is great. I was unclear from the commission's first meeting whether they're going to get to a point where they vote on a particular bill that says we want the bill that's lithium-ion battery EPR bill or this particular paint bill, and they're going to pull the full weight in force of the governor and the secretary and the commissioner behind a particular bill with the legislature, or it's information only on a website or in a plan. I know there's some liaison work that DEP does with the legislature, but I would encourage you don't need to answer now, but think about with the EPR Commission what that means. Because around the country there's different degrees, and Dave Nightingale can comment more on that. Probably like Washington, a degree, a spectrum of active engagement by the staff at DEP or the government, if you will. And we're right now a group of volunteers pushing these things, right? So it's a heavy lift. So I think it's great these are in the plan, but I would specifically mention other items and then add elements, meaning research specific programs at other states, EPR for these items, especially Vermont.
Thank you, Phil. We'll see who we can add to our next meeting and get input from them. You mentioned mattress support. Are there other programs or that you think we could include in the elements portion?
Definitely the batteries, lithium-ion batteries is massive. I mean, that's collected at the facility in Boulder, County, Colorado, and it's a major fire hazard. As you know, Roxbury burned down about a month ago, transfer station. So if you're going to include paint, which is oil-based paint, which is great, because that's flammable. I would include batteries in there, absolutely. And more broadly, HHW, HHP, again, like Vermont, right? So um, that's the bigger one. Um, there's also, I would also, I think Scott Cassell mentioned there already are programs for thermostats in mercury, but they're sunsetting or fading away. So I'd specifically look to the EPR presentation that Scott Cassell did and add those items on this list to make sure they don't sunset and that they're still well. I mean, that's your bailiwick, Caitlin, I believe, is Mercury and others. So those are like hidden EPRs, right? But bring them forward, make sure they're still going to be around for a long time, get them in the plan specifically, call them out. Right now, paint is the only one you've got listed that I see here.
Yeah, thank
Relative
you.
to just relative to the EPR commission, batteries are part of that as well. So
Yep.
we can expand this, at least specific to the EPR commission. We'll mention batteries as well, lithium batteries in particular.
Okay. Janamine has her hand raised.
Ew, hello, Rick. Hi, good morning, everyone. So I agree with what Phil is saying. I have a bunch of comments on this slide, and I know we're doing this on the fly because you weren't able to, get it out yesterday, which I totally understand. So I agree, paint care is just one of the common EPR categories. There's mattress programs, electronics, and I think what Phil is saying is whether this is in the plan or DEP just put some resources towards it. But Vermont has been doing this for a long time. I mean, this is not, we're not create, Massachusetts doesn't have to create the wheel. The wheel has been going down the highway and, we're kind of still riding the bicycle. So, reach out. I mean, there's nothing in here about connecting with your peers in other states who have somehow their legislators and their DEP equivalents have managed to get things going. And, I think New Hampshire, I'm pretty sure I just read that New Hampshire banned lithium ion batteries. And I'm like, New Hampshire, come on, guys. So I know it's not DEP's, I know you're limited, but I think expanding that first category and it took us 20 years, 30 years to get, right, 1996 to get this renewal plan. So let's try to not just think about what we're dealing with now, but there may need to be more broader categories. So truly a plan which says, support promotion of EPR for current and future products. We don't know. We have no idea in 10 years what our waste stream is going to look like. And all the time there are new products. And so maybe there's going to be something else in 5 or 10 years. I'm going to say, oh gosh, that needs to be part of our plan. So just want to encourage you to think about, 2025 and 2035 and 2045. So my other comment is, the retailers, and I know, I understand kind of the roadblocks in the legislature. And I think it's great that you have components in here about working with retailers and incentivizing retailers, but it's not the local Aubuchon hardware that needs to be convinced, right? It's the Retailers Association. It's the industry groups which are representing their members. And so how can the state work with, again, I think this is going to your peers in other states because I live in Vermont, so, I can go to Brown and Roberts hardware store in Brattleboro and bring back my paint. I can bring back my lamps. So somehow they got over that hurdle, and I'm not sure it was easy, but it's one thing to talk to retailers, but you really need to be having conversations with industry groups, with the paint industry, with the hardware store retailers industry group. So I think again, these are very good kind of on the ground steps, but if you want this plan to really address the issues in a long-term way and kind of at a higher level, I think this just needs to be, the slide needs to be 2 slides, and kind of expanded beyond that.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, and if anybody, like, that's all good input. Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments? Do we have anything in the chat? We can circle back to the chat at the end too. Maybe we'll just keep pushing through if nobody has any outstanding questions. Okay, so next slide. So longer term implementation, again, the goal here is encourage disaster preparedness. So creating plans with municipalities that include solid waste master plan and CEMPs. Are there any comments about disaster preparedness, Phil?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you got it.
Yeah.
Another big topic. And this is a plan, right? So these are broad strokes, but you can see from the comments already, these are initiatives within DEP. So every one of these is a large topic that the department needs to kind of figure out beyond a written plan, how they're going to allocate resources to do this with staff and contractors, et cetera. So that's just a broad comment. I think, John and Richard, you guys have your work cut out for you with that. I know there's limited staff time. So, but the reality is we need these sorts of things. Okay. So in disaster preparedness, I know there's a contractor, Ashbrit, for collection. And I know there's a contractor, GMC, for the paperwork with FEMA. But there really isn't a contract for disposal or at a facility. So I think when you say incorporate HHW, I think there needs to be some cross work, John, with fleshing out how to do that in more detail to assist the municipalities. I would encourage DEP to work with MEMA on a triage plan, reach out to your counterparts around the country. I would suggest Los Angeles. I would suggest Region 1 EPA with the region, whatever in Los Angeles with the fires. They had a whole protocol for what happened with all of that. And also with Texas, Houston, and Florida, and have that plan fleshed out in much greater detail. Where did all that material go? Does it have to go to a subtitle C landfill? Does it have to go to, because we have only one subtitle C landfill in all of the Northeast that I'm aware of. It was up in Model City. Does DEP have a contact up there? Do they have a contract? Suddenly if we had to put everything to a subtitle C landfill out of a disaster, you're talking huge impacts. So there's another big topic here, but I think it's important you have it on your plan. So as I said earlier, it's a larger topic that needs to be fleshed out. So those are the comments about getting to the core of that one too. Hope that helps. But reach out to your colleagues around I guess the other theme is you have some colleagues who've been through a lot of this around the country, in this case, tragically so. But I think the municipality is going to need a lot of help if we were to have a major flood or hurricane or fire.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that creating those plans kind of starts explaining what further we need to address. Jan, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. So I think statewide, I know certainly on the Cape and in Western Mass, there are regional planning commissions, and most municipalities look to that agency to help them with things like this. So when Franklin County, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, we focused on disaster plans, and I participated and helped write it, but it was really the Regional Council of Governments, so the regional planning agency that wrote it, because they have the mutual aid, they're working with towns on mutual aid. And, it may not be on their radar to deal with waste management. I think the template that John Fisher had sent all of those years ago, maybe included that. And I think most people would know that you're going to end up with household hazardous products from a flood or a tornado or something. But those local regional planning commissions are great resources, and so I just encourage you to add that as a note to somehow work with them or send them information or just pull them into this goal.
Thank you. Okay, any other thoughts about disaster preparedness? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So now we're jumping into the shorter term implementation. This is row 4, and the goal here is to encourage/expand one-day event reciprocal agreements. So more specifically, Max can assist with regional support and coordination. Additionally, provide technical assistance on event permits, helping to streamline processes. Are these reciprocal agreements effective? Are there ways to improve them? Jan, you have your hand raised.
I do. Again, what are the odds?
Surprising.
Phil and I have been doing this for a long time, so I hope people can bear with us because we're really just responding to what we're seeing this morning. The reciprocal events definitely work. At least they work in Franklin County, Western Massachusetts. There are probably 10 communities or regional groups that offer reciprocal access. So I have residents from Franklin County towns who are already signing up for South Hadley's collection. For those of you who know, South Hadley is not in Franklin County; it's in Hampden County. I think Hampden, maybe Hampshire, I think Hampden. So anyways, we use it all the time. We send people to other sites, and once in a great while, somebody will send somebody to our site. So it's a really great idea. I think the challenge here, and I don't really know where this fits, but it's really some of the frequency issues are vendor related. So we have now a new contract, FAC 110, just the bids just closed yesterday. So hopefully we'll be adding more household hazardous waste day vendors, but
That's the next slide.
okay, but they book out. So so as far as frequency and open hours, it really has to do with whether or not you can even book a vendor. So
Heather Billings has a question in the chat. Will there be another place in the plan where non-resident and VSQGs may be able to participate is addressed?
We'll see. We'll see when we get there. I think that.
And Phil Goddard has his hand raised. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it's mostly DEP folks today. So for your next meeting, maybe you need to send out the notice a little earlier. Maybe I don't know, or people just dropped off in interest. So that's why it's just the two of us mainly talking right now, looking at the participant list here. But yeah, the reciprocal agreements work. I think it's fantastic. But getting those contracts in place, whoever the lead is in this case, we have fortunate to have Marshall County doing that. It's a slog. It's a lot of work. Claire does a lot of work, but there have been some problems with OSD and the bidding coming out in a timely fashion. So I'll make this, and it's not going to be popular that I say this, but we asked 2 years ago for a subcommittee of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee to be formed formally so that we'd have an outlet for these discussions. We're reacting to a couple of slides here, trying to give you years worth of information that's going to go on a couple of boxes on some slides on a page. And I'm concerned the follow-up is not going to be there in a place for us to discuss that. Unless, Richard, you have plans with that, or John, that was the purpose of the solid waste subcommittee that we asked for, that we were told was not going to happen, because there's so much to talk about on an ongoing basis. How's it going this year? Where are the weaknesses in the contracts? How did that disaster? I mean, I think even if you meet twice a year. So I just throw that out. The reciprocity is great, and encourage the MACs to do it. The MACs aren't going to do it. It's the municipalities are going to do it. So I don't know how much they can actually do other than encourage it. What we need is the help on the contracting and the coordination and the funding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And those are we need a place to talk about those things so you can find out how to help us better.
Okay, so I'm hearing incorporating the municipalities input. Okay. Are there any other thoughts about the reciprocal agreements or improvement recommendations? We do understand this is a lot. So again, like to whatever capacity that you can, I think following up with an email, maybe explaining some specifics about what we can incorporate. I think we want to kind of keep it vague for this plan, but also if we have specifics that we want to address and move forward with, then I think breaking it down is really important too.
And I'm hearing loud and clear Phil's comment that we need help with contracting and funding. We're hearing you loud and clear.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide here for shorter term implementation. So this is row 5, broaden statewide government HHP OSD contract. In doing that, we are expanding category eligibility, publicizing the statewide government contract availability, expanding the vendor list for WMR 001, which was FAC 110, statewide contract to provide resources and services for collection of the HHP. And then that includes what's listed in the notes. So are there other services that are needed and could be addressed through a statewide contract? So if we could list any further services that are not listed under the notes here. And again, this is not something that we need to vocalize right now. You can always email me later. Phil.
I suggest you reach out to Claire. She was unavailable, but she really ran into this issue with the contracts. Like by the time she got the pricing, she was already beyond her planning horizon. So you need to do a deep dive on the timing with OSD and how it's communicated to the users of those agreements. And you need to reach out to the private sector and talk about, you may want to have a specific form on that particular issue and broadly announce it so that if person putting together 18 collections isn't going to use the state contract because it wasn't ready in time, kind of defeats the purpose. So broaden the statewide, right? But I would say do elements, annual review with the contractors, OSD, and municipalities, something like that, so that the logistics line up and match the timing of this, especially with large planning areas like a cooperative or Barnstable County, so that they don't have to go and reinvent the wheel and put out their own county bid.
I'm going to jump in here without raising my hand. I'm on, and Caitlin and Claire, we're on the new OSD contract, WMR 001, and bids just came in yesterday. But I just want to let you know that we have a new contact there who's done a great job and really heard the concerns about timing. And so I think that's been addressed as far as getting prices out before July 1st. And also, we asked for 2-year pricing, 2 years for HHW collections. So municipalities will have FY26 and FY27 pricing because of that issue, because you can't really wait till the last minute to get your pricing. So I think I'm hoping that has been resolved or addressed at least.
David, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, something that's not on here. I'm not sure how your contracting limits on topics go, but something that's always a need every year is to provide training to local governments, whether they are just to help run a collection event or actually getting new staff at a permanent facility trained up. But that's something that might possibly end up on this list of elements as well.
Thank you. We do address that with our next table for outreach education, but
yeah, could be in this kind of contract here with the waste vendor, which I mean, they should have that expertise already. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, training was included in the bid specs. So
Oh, good.
it's, you know,
Okay.
they have the option to offer free training or pay, training for a cost, but every category requires they get points for the more training they offer.
Great.
Okay. Any other thoughts about services that could be addressed through statewide contract? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So this is the last row for shorter term implementation before we move on to outreach education. So this is row 6, expand adoption of EPPs within state and municipalities. Do this by working with OSD and increase the availability and incentives to municipalities. What is needed to grow the market for EPP adoption and use?
I'm not gonna raise my hand because
Go, Jan, go.
nobody else is talking except Phil and I and David. I think, OSD, DEP has used the recycling dividend program, the RDP program, to affect great change. And so, like the kind of path of least resistance is you allow communities to use their RDP funding to buy EPP products. But if you gave them a point for buying reclaimed products or buying EPP that's specifically in the, replacing hazardous products, you know, that translates into money. And for large communities, it's significant. 1 point would go a long way, I think, to really, making change in this category. If that's what you wanted to do, was to get communities to purchase more EPPs in lieu of hazardous products, that's definitely the way to go.
Okay. Jan, maybe we can talk later about the point system.
Yeah. Okay. Or you can just reach out to Kathy Mirza. She's like the queen of the section that does RDP.
I'm coming for you, Kathy.
Yeah. Or Rachel Smith.
Thank you. Phil?
This also is related to health and safety. So I would encourage you to reach out to Division of Labor Standards. There's doing a lot of OSHA training for state communities that are now, and again, Jen has a lot of experience with this, writing an OSHA plan for her drop-off facilities. All municipalities are upgrading their health and safety awareness and training and SDSs and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, you want to substitute things that, maybe the facilities folks need to understand. I'm working on that internally in Bourne. If we could get rid of bleach, you can use this instead, so forth, so on. So you may want to, if you're hearing a theme today, it's working with other agencies within the state and working with other states. Just a quick note, I did put in the chat, John, it's mislabeled on your SWAC page. It's not the presentation to the Cape Cod Canal Chamber. It's the PowerPoint that Juanita presented on behalf of Claire, Calliope, and myself, and a year ago almost, to the SWAC on HHW. And it includes in there, Caitlin and Richard, a work plan. A lot of similar themes that I've talked about that somehow you can glean from that. So that's what that's all about. It's a PowerPoint that DEP posted from the SWAC meeting a year ago.
Just on the SWAC page, what I see is presentation, local government, household hazardous products.
So if you click that on, and I copied the URL and posted it in the chat, and that's the way it was labeled. So it's just weird.
Okay, I don't get that anywhere.
Okay. So it works when you click it. So I don't know why I didn't label it that way. I just wanted to make sure people.
It's not labeled that way, but okay.
It says right in the chat, presentation to Cape Cod.
I see what the chat. I just looked at the website, so it doesn't say that.
Gotcha. I just want to make sure that people didn't know that I was putting a canal chamber region presentation in there. So you've got stuff in there to work with. So I would tie this to health and safety too. That helps you out.
It does, yeah. We can incorporate something. Okay. Any other thoughts about what is needed to grow the market for EPP adoption and use? Anything in the chat? Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. Oh, sorry. There's one more, I think, for, yeah, just one more for shorter term implementation. So the row number 7. So pursue expansion of collection categories of MWC MSPs. So MWC MSPs have funded universal waste sheds that collect mercury-added products and other items as well. Are there thoughts on what materials might be effectively collected and managed through MSPs? Maybe increasing materials, or I know that there's some thoughts about shifting.
Well, I think if you go back to that slide, you know, the discussion about the producer responsibility, right? Like this could be a wide open category, and I guess the question is, is there a line where the waste conductors are like no more, but you could add all kinds of HHP into this list because they should be pulling it out anyway, or you'd think they'd want to pull it out. So maybe it's paint, maybe it's other general cleaners or household products. I'm not thinking about the list right off the top of my head, but I think again you could probably expand that. Certainly lithium-ion batteries, but yeah. Anyways,
Always
think-
lithium-ion batteries.
yeah, they're not. I was going to say they're not. This is about funding the collection. I was thinking they're not. I was thinking about like a waste. Them pulling them out. And I'm like, nobody's going to find a lithium-ion battery. But yeah, certainly funding the collection program for them would benefit everybody.
Propane tanks